Why do women overrate their value, but say a man ain't, but all of them or they are good women?
So a part of what it means to be a man in America, actually a man anywhere that practices like patriarchy, means that you're graded from a very early age on performance. Every aspect of your life, like as a boy, once you hit puberty and you able to like physically perform, you are expected to do so. Whether it's in a sport, an instrument, somewhere you expected to physically perform, contribute to your household. So even before matriculation into manhood, performance matters. Under this same system, women are not expected to perform until there's a ring on their finger. Other than that, she is to be prepared for marriage. Do you understand the fine line between the two? So there is no context prior to marriage, historically, that a woman is supposed to be graded on unless she holds some societal position that's valuable. Then she is to be graded on that job and not her presence as a woman. So I just want to put this historical context out there for the fellas who might have felt that with you when you swung, because you swung hard as but as a nigga that done got beat up before, I know that swinging hard does not imply good form.
I understand.
It does not imply aim, nor does it imply that you about to win the fight. Brother, I pray for you, because you seem like a solid brother outside of the moment that we just met you in.
Right.
I'm gonna go away now. Perhaps far. Because it might get greasy out here.
You know, normally I like Trip, but in this instance, that back half of what he was saying, Trip is tripping. Trip is straight tripping. So let me explain. Now, I think the gentleman, he threw a punch. The punch was accurate. The punch was timely, and the punch hit his mark. Trip initially started out, he was with the punch. Men are graded from birth on their ability to produce, their ability to be a man, their ability to protect, their ability to provide, their ability to lead, to make good decisions. That is all true. Men are accepted. We are graded from birth when it comes to if you are husband material. But then he played the old Steve Harvey placate to the women bullshit. And yes, Trip, that was bullshit. You're in my city of Atlanta casting down some bullshit. I might have to make that 3-day trip from San Antonio back to Atlanta to correct you on this one, my guy. But here's the thing. And I know it's probably with good intentions. I don't know. Or it's good marketing because, you know, you got a room that's mostly filled with women. But here's the point. You say that women are only to be prepared for marriage and that they don't have to produce or show anything of that nature until they either get the ring or if they are in a position, a monetary position where production is measured. Now, the first problem is that you put everything is based on monetary production instead of the more intrinsic thing that actually makes for a great relationship. You see, and then you put it in a historical context of patriarchy, but you're missing out on the ideas of even historically, a woman demonstrated that she was ready to be a wife. She showed production of being able to be a wife because she learned how to cook with her mother. She learned how to keep the house clean with her mother. Now we're talking historically. We're talking 50s. We're talking the early 1900s, the 1800s, the 1700s, on back to as far back as you want to go in time. In general, in most societies, where there was a patriarchy or a matriarchy, it didn't matter, but in most societies that were patriarchal, since that's where he want to stand, historically, women demonstrated their ability to be a wife by how well she cooked, how well she kept the house clean, how she kept it organized, how well she raised the children, how well she sewed, how well she traded whatever materials she made at home and traded them to the market, how well she took care of the animals that were in the household vicinity, how well she cared for her husband and his clothing, and how well she prepared things for him. She had duties that she learned from her mother, her grandmother, her aunts, the other women in the community. She had to demonstrate those things to see if she was wife material. You see, we into this mode where it's the man that has to prove himself, but the woman doesn't have to prove himself until she's married. But everybody always want to talk about history. Well, historically, my grandmother knew how to cook, clean, how to take care of kids, how to take care of the smaller animals around the house, how to sew, how to knit, before my grandfather, who was out there working and building before they got together. You see, my grandmother knew all those things. She was not only prepared, but she was measured on her ability to do that, as most women were. You talk to these women back in the day, they learned these things. They knew how to cook, they knew how to clean, they knew how to sew. But we don't want to do that today now, do we? We don't want to say that that makes a wife now, do we? But we want to keep the same standard that it takes to be a man. And see, here's the problem. This is the reason, and that's why Trip is tripping. Because that standard of a man being able to show and prove, a woman has to show and prove as well. But here's the big problem. Here's the big problem. We don't live in an agrarian state anymore. We don't live in a time frame where women don't have as much of an ability to go out there and be productive in the workforce as a man, that a woman can build a life without a man. We don't live in that society anymore. But men are still expected to produce. Well, women, you are still expected to produce as well. You are still expected to show that you are a wife. And this is where the downfall is. And it's a little bit of a shift on this video. You got men out here trying to learn to be a husband, but they didn't grow up inside of a man's house who was being a husband. You got women growing up in households where there wasn't a woman in that household who was a wife. So if you got men growing up and there's no husband to emulate, women growing up, there's no wife to emulate. You didn't learn how to be a husband. You didn't learn how to be a wife. Let me put it this way. If you wanted to learn how to fix a car, do you go to a dentist or would you go to a mechanic? If you want to learn how to do neurosurgery, would you go to a neurosurgeon or would you go to a pilot? No, you're going to go to the person who knows how to do the thing that they're doing. You want to learn how to do accounting, how to be a banker, you're going to learn from a banker, from an accountant. You're not going to learn from the garbage man. That's who you're going to learn from. But we're not learning like that. Many people in general don't have that structure around you. You see, I learned how to be somewhat of a husband from my grandfather. I learned how to be somewhat of a husband from some of the men that I was around growing up. Now, they weren't all good. And just because somebody was married for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, doesn't mean that they were a good husband, doesn't mean they were a good wife. You got to dig into the depths of that. You see, when you get with somebody and the mother is saying that, oh, this is what a wife does and this is what his woman in the street's gonna do. That's not a good wife. That doesn't matter that they was married for 30, 40 years. It's not a good wife. Them not lessons you need to learn from. Man used to beat his wife. Don't need to learn from that man. Now, I do accept, and because I am this way myself, I learn better from watching people do things that I don't want to be. So I can learn from watching the negative. Okay, my grandfather didn't show a lot of affection to my grandmother. I saw the pain that my grandmother felt from not receiving that affection. So I became a very affectionate person because I recognized that's what my grandmother wanted. As great of a woman she was, as great of a man he was, that was lacking. So I learned from, I don't want to be like that. I see this attribute, this trait. I don't want, I'm going to do the opposite of that. So you can learn from those things. But if you don't even have a husband, don't even have a wife in your life that you can learn from, nah. And just because they've been together for a long time, it don't mean shit. But we all need to learn how to be a husband, how to be a wife prior to becoming a husband or a wife. OJT is not good. On the job training, that's not good. That's what I did when I was 19. That's not good. So you're tripping. And ladies, stop thinking that you get a free pass because you don't. And men, learn from real husbands, not these jokers on the street. And always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself.